Okay, so you've all had this document shared with you, the plot according to ... activity, and basically it's a way of you becoming a character from the play and getting to know them a little bit better, thinking about their experience and particularly trying to empathize with them throughout this. So what I've done is basically create a template. You'll each have one of these templates. This is one long continuous document. I've already put your names on your version, and I'm just avoiding going to that section now so that when I post this video on YouTube, it doesn't have your names in it. But basically, your name will be here at the top. You will need to insert a title here. So basically the play is called Romeo and Juliet, but think about what would your character name the play if it was just told from their perspective. Your character name here that you choose and include a picture below. So that's the space to include a picture. Then you've got some writing prompts, so there's some sentence starters here. First one is, I remember the first time I heard about ... And I've written here, use these headings above to prompt your writing from the character's perspective. In this section, be as descriptive as you can be about the event or character you choose to describe. So this, first time I heard about, you're going to hear about an event or it could be a character. So in the example one that I've got below, here's an example version that can help you out. So I've done it from Nurse's perspective, and I've said, Nurse Michael played my Juliet, gone too soon. Here's a picture of Juliet and Nurse together. And I've got here, I remember the first time I heard about this boy, Romeo. Yeah, he was always a troublemaker. So already starting to build this lens of how Nurse might feel about the events of the play. And you can have a look at that there. So this is basically an opportunity, before you just list what happens in the plot, this is an opportunity for you to think about what might that character comment on, like what might that, it's a way for you to reveal their personality, the things that they're kind of mad about or emotive about or sad about as well. Then the next writing prompt is, I guess the problems all really started when. This is about how you frame the whole story. So, even thinking about the fact that you guys did To Kill a Mockingbird, we talked a lot about how the story is framed as the story of how Jem broke his arm and how that lens is kind of significant. So here you've got to think about the story of Romeo and Juliet, like where did this problem begin? What ultimately caused the tragedy. So I've got here, what is important to them? That's the character that you choose. So in my example, what is important to Nurse? What did Nurse primarily lose in the death of Romeo and Juliet? And I would say she lost Juliet. Like, she doesn't really care about Romeo. She loses Juliet, who she was very close with. And then consider the character's personality. So consider what Nurse is like. Is she likely to blame others for Juliet's death? Kind of accept that death? Is she likely to see the event as just kind of bad luck or like a terrible coincidence? Or is she likely to see the event even as her own fault in some way? Like if she's like, oh, I could have done something to prevent it. So let your understanding of the character in all of these ways affect the way you frame an answer to this question. So I guess the problem's already started when. And here in my example, I've said, I reckon, this is just my take on it, that Nurse would have thought the problems all really started when Juliet got married. And that's what she probably would have blamed herself most for, because she assisted with that. And then also, I've kind of like portrayed Nurse as this like old religious figure. So the idea that like, oh, she should have just married Paris. She should have just obeyed her parents and then none of this wouldn't have happened. I've mentioned that she thinks that Paris is a nice boy but an idiot, which is probably how Nurse would have felt about him. And then she would have said something like, it's better to be heartbroken than dead. That's what I think. Like, I think that's what Nurse would honestly perceive of it. But obviously Juliet is the opposite of that. She literally verbatim says, like, I would rather die than be married to Paris. So I've mentioned here as well that Nurse perceives Juliet to be stubborn like both of her parents. And then the final one here is the way I remember it was. And this is where you kind of go through some of those major plot points, not all the major plot points, I have said all, but go through the major plot points that your character would have been present or aware of and recount the story, just focusing on what they would have known and how they would have seen the story unfolding. So this is just a good opportunity for you to kind of consider each of the characters actually and like how they would have perceived the event. So as I was writing this for Nurse, and this is quite long. It does not have to be this long. I just wanted to give you a really robust example. So the way I remember it was she and Romeo met that fateful night when Romeo and his drunken friends snuck into the party that my lady and my lord hosted. So also note the way they describe, like the way that she names, I thought she would have referred to these characters as that. Not all knew that he was there, but I saw, she would have noticed, and so did Tybalt, God rest his soul, like those little tidbits that are kind of nursey. The next I know, Juliet is at me all night about sending letters to Romeo and getting married. I'm sure they only danced together for an hour at the party and didn't see each other since. So I thought about the fact that I'm like, oh, Nurse doesn't know that Romeo comes back to the garden. Remember, she's calling for Juliet, and Juliet's like, shh. She pleads with Juliet, she wouldn't relent. And so I figure a hasty marriage is better than my Juliet losing her virtue. So she doesn't want Juliet and Romeo to sleep together and then for her to like lose all of this virginal purity that would have been important in the society at the time and also important to Nurse particularly. So she helps them plan the wedding. It was not long, though, before my lord decided that Juliet ought to be married to Paris. He was mean and very hard about it, and Juliet went cold and hard herself. I could not be in her counsel, but I helped her gently as I could. I feared for her life if ever my lord found out that she was already wed. And then, just like that, she was bewitched. So I'm thinking also about the language that she would use. I hear my Juliet say that she will marry Paris and repents of her disobedience. I was shocked, but said none. The night before the wedding, she would not see me. She was like a possessed one, strange and somber. She needed an Adderall to prepare, she said. I let her be. And that was the last living memory of her I have. By morning, she was white and stone cold dead. They laid her away. And next I see her doubly dead, in the tomb, stabbed in her broken heart. Strange and terrible business, God rest her soul. So it just occurred to me that, you know, like the Nurse isn't there when Juliet wakes up and then sees Romeo dead. She just sees Juliet dead and then sees Juliet dead, stabbed. So, you know, it just like got me thinking about what Nurse knows and what Nurse doesn't know and how that affects her involvement in the story. So you get to choose any character that you like. I'll kind of guide that process so we're not all just doing the same character because that's boring. It would be great to have a few accounts actually of, you know, if we can cover all the characters, that would be awesome. But you know, sometimes the more minor characters are actually even more interesting. Romeo and Juliet are endlessly complex characters that would be good ones to do. And I hope we get a few people doing Romeo and a few people getting Juliet. But also it'd be interesting to have Paris's account, you know, Lord Capulet's account of the events as well. Certainly Friar Lawrence's account, very, very interesting. And Benvolio's account, like what does Romeo's wingman think about all of this? So if you kind of would like to, you know, really stretch yourself and challenge yourself, I encourage you to pick a more minor character because it will require you to be more imaginative. There'll be more filling in the blanks from your own imagination.